Here's something that I was not aware of until I was older, and I don't want to assume or presume that you don't know this, but did you know that politicians are really charming? Like, even ones that you wouldn't agree with, on some level, are probably going to be tremendously charismatic and charming and engaging. This is not something I knew until, gosh, I might have already been in my 40s. Let's say I learned it in my 30s. It'll make me look like I was a little bit more with it. So, one of the many flights that I've told you about, this one was from Dulles to Amsterdam. And so here's the thing I do. You know, this is not a channel about collecting airline miles and credit card points, but it could be. If it were, I have lots of tips that I could tell you about this. But suffice to say, I found out a way to make points turn into upgrades. So I was on the swelligant, efficient, tidily presented KLM, Royal Dutch Airways, and I figured out before departure, because I was, of course, at the Air France/KLM departure lounge at Dulles, quite an elegant place. I looked around the room and recognized some politicians. Chief among them, Paul Ryan, who was starting to become known. He might have, I don't know if he was Speaker of the House at this point. It was before he ran on the ticket with Romney. So it was before 2012, but after he had risen to some prominence. He might have come out with that budget, that really Spartan budget that was like, you know, we have enough money for the chassis but no wheels. And he was on the flight, and this other guy, who I recognized from saying something at a hearing or from being interviewed on the news, and then some other people, here we all were on this flight. Interestingly, all these American patriots were taking a foreign airline when I'm pretty sure there were domestic airlines that could fly from Dulles to Amsterdam. In fact, a few. But no, we were on KLM because it's a better airline. Just pointing that out. America, we're the best, but let's take a Dutch airline because they're better. So at one point I was out of my seat. I had gotten up a few hours into the flight, and Paul Ryan was standing where my seat was, talking to the person who was seated to my left. And as I came into the aisle, I said, "Excuse me," and he stepped in to make room for me to pass. And I said, "Oh, that's where I'm seated." And he very politely said, oh, I didn't know, but was just as charming and charismatic as could be. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And he really wanted to make sure I understood that, you know, he wasn't punking me. He really thought he was getting out of my way. So I tell this story, and he's one of the people that I use as the example of politicians having charm and charisma. They get where they are not because of their budgets or even their policies, but because of some kind of personal charm. But wait, there's more. Because the person that I'm describing, whose name I didn't quite have on that flight, is someone I looked up afterward. I, in fact, went through the congressional roll for each state until I found him, because he was so obnoxious. And his name is Jason Chaffetz. He's no longer in Congress. He had that like curly hairdo that was always shiny and put together, and like really nicely capped teeth, and, you know, put together, well groomed. In the morning, when we're making our landing in Amsterdam, I was coming from the front to the back of the fancy cabin to the lavatory, And he was coming from the second chunk of fancy cabin to the same lavatory, and we looked at each other, and he walked faster so that he got in there before me, which, you know, that's part of the thing. I get it. You know, you don't get enough perks as a congressional representative. You know, you don't have nice meals with lobbyists, and you don't get special gifts and stuff like that, because that would have to be disclosed. So, you know, I get it. You know, you're on a budget. He did have a really fancy looking tracksuit that he was wearing. Looked comfortable and expensive. And again, I looked him up because I was like, I'm going to find out who that is. It's not because he cut me off. It's because he then spent 10 minutes in the lavatory. I don't know if he was primping. I don't know if he was fixing the hair. I don't know if he was changing tracksuits. I don't know if he was like reapplying deodorant, powdering, moisturizing. Or maybe he was just having a giant dump and it just took that long. But here's the thing. Don't be a jerk, because you never know who you're going to run into. So Paul Ryan, I have nothing but nice things to say about him personally. And Jason Chaffetz, I went out of my way to figure out who he was, because he cut me off and then spent 10 minutes in the lavatory on a flight from Dulles to Amsterdam. And I still remember.